Good evening and welcome to Mental Health, Wellness, and Recovery. My name is Richard Weingarten and I'll be your host for tonight's show. The COVID-19 pandemic had a huge impact on everyone, but it had a particularly harsh impact on children and teens. Their lives were upended by school closings, remote learning, being cut off from their friends, and not being able to deal with the loss and upheaval in their lives. A study by the Center for Disease Control and Prevention, CDC, showed that 1 in 3 high school students experienced poor mental health during the pandemic. Nearly half, or 50% of teens, felt sad or hopeless on a regular basis. Female students, or those who identify as lesbian, gay, biracial, and other, experience higher levels of mental health problems and suicide-related problems. The CDC found that racism is also a public health concern. More than 1/3 of Black, Brown, Asian, and multiracial students experience racism. Black students were most likely to report hunger and not enough food in their homes. As you might expect, when schools reopened, 2/3 of the public schools saw a high percentage of their students needing more mental health services than pre-pandemic. The rate of depression and anxiety increased greatly among their students. In the face of this crisis, only 50% of schools reported they were equipped to deal with the mental health and behavioral needs of their students. 72% of schools reported needing to provide trauma support and remedial education. 75% said they needed to provide summer enrichment programs. Complicating these attempts to come to the mental health aid of students were widespread teacher shortages. Many teachers retired or left teaching during the pandemic. 69% of public schools had too few candidates for open teaching positions. 64% of public schools reported a lack of qualified individuals for these open teaching positions. I've read that as many as 30%, or about 1/3 of all middle and high school students, were in need of mental health services. And unlike the period before the COVID-19 pandemic, students were seeking mental health services and supports. Gone were the days when students felt ashamed or were too shy to identify their mental health. I want to ask my guests tonight what caused the turnaround and how the schools and other programs are responding to students' requests for help and support. If the pandemic taught us anything, it is that we must support our youth experiencing these mental health challenges. I'm glad to report that schools are stepping up and providing mental health, education, and care to students at every level. I'm fortunate tonight to have on my guests 2 women who have been greatly involved in providing mental health services, not only to children and teens, but to their parents. Hearing from them tonight, we will learn about the new mental health orientation in schools, and we will hear how families are stepping up to help their children. My first guest tonight is Kathleen Cody, a National Certified Counselor and Licensed Professional Counselor. Kathy is the Director of Mental Health, Student Wellness, and Family Engagement for the Kinley Public Schools. Kathy also oversees the evaluation and implementation of a comprehensive system of mental health supports and services within the 5 schools in Killington District. Kathy, welcome to the program. Can you shed any light on why students are asking for help with mental health issues? Was it or still is a stigma regarding mental health among children?
So I think that the collective experience that we all went through of going through the pandemic was very detrimental for a lot of children and families. But I would say that one of the silver linings of going through that experience was that because everybody had a shared experience of being lonely and isolated through the pandemic, we saw that kids were more able to identify their own loneliness and feelings of needing support for their mental health when they came back to school. So we recognized pretty quickly all those statistics that you read about teacher shortages and children having more difficulty with dysregulation and things like that. We certainly experienced them in Killingly, as I think most school districts across the state did. But we've been in the enviable position of being able to create programs to support the needs, and kids are very eager and accepting of the supports that we're able to provide.
That's great. Well, that's encouraging, isn't it? My next guest is Dr. Christine Schittling, and you are the head of the IOP program, Hopewell Health Solutions.
Correct.
And you're based in Glastonbury.
Correct, yeah.
Could you tell us a little bit about your program, Christine?
Sure. So we started out about a year ago with a program for teens, so kids 12 to 17 years old, an IOP program, which stands for Intensive Outpatient Program. What an intensive outpatient program is it's intensive, so the kids come 4 days a week, 3 hours a day, Monday through Thursday.
Do they come to your office, or
They do.
It's,
They
it's
come
not
to our
virtual;
office.
it's in person,
It's
right?
in person. I
Okay.
believe very strongly in in-person services, especially since COVID. Just a little fact to keep in mind is that 90% of communication is nonverbal. As a therapist and as a psychologist, part of our job is to fully engage with our patients and our clients and to feel what they're feeling, and that's very, very hard to do behind a screen. So really for us even for a therapist to be fully engaged, it really needs to be in person. So we are in person. IOP really, it comes from the model of it takes a village to raise a child. You have a team of people working with your child. You have a medical team, psychiatrists, psychiatric PAs. You have psychologists and therapists, art therapists, mentors, support staff.
This is all part of your IOP
All part
program.
of the IOP. And we work as a team and as a group to help kids through this period.
Let me ask you a couple more
Sure.
questions about the IOP. How do students come to your program? Are they referred to your program, or do they volunteer, and also how do their parents get involved?
Sure. So I get a lot of self-referrals. We're very well known in the Glastonbury community to be sort of preeminent mental health facility, but I also get a lot of referrals from youth service bureaus and schools, from other psychiatrists, sometimes other therapists, but many of them come from parents who have heard about us and want something different for their child.
And your students come from all over the state too, don't they?
They do. So we have had students all the way from Greenwich, Ridgefield areas, all the way up to Suffield, right around the Massachusetts border, and also from New Haven. So we are the only, there's some distinctive differences about us. We are the only IOP for teens in the state that is strictly mental health. What that means is all the other IOPs in the state of Connecticut for teens mix kids with substance abuse, with kids with eating disorders, with also kids that have mental health concerns. My feeling is that those are all different treatments. A kid who has substance abuse needs a different treatment and a different treatment protocol than a kid who has anxiety or depression. So we have decided that we are going to be just strictly mental health, and it's worked out really, really well. We're able to tailor, customize, and focus our program on developing these kids and helping them grow and get out there, out into the community in a healthy way.
Do you deal with the kids as a group or individually, or both?
So IOP, because we have them, 3 hours a day for 4 days a week, it's a long period of time. So each day is a mixture of different things. It does include individual therapy. They get their own individual clinician. It also includes group therapy. It also includes medication management. And that's an opt-in program. You don't have to be on medication to be in the IOP program. And then we also offer family therapy, which I strongly recommend, because at the end of the day, the children are going home with the parents, and we really want to be holistic about creating a really healthy
When
dynamic.
you're being holistic with the parents, are you meeting with them as a group or individually? And do you also do parent and student therapy together.
Yes, yes.
How did that go?
So family, it depends. It can go very well and it can be very challenging. So it just, it's the luck of the draw. You never know what you're going to get. But the family therapy has to happen with the child and the parents, and sometimes the siblings too. It really depends on what the different issues are and how we're going to address it. But it is such an important piece of putting everything back together again, and really that's the thing about IOP is we sort of take care of all the pieces. So a lot of times a child who has mental health concerns may be getting their medication from a pediatrician, or they may be getting their medication from another psychiatrist, and then having therapy with a therapist, and then maybe doing family therapy or not doing family therapy, and we collaborate all together.
Mm-hmm. With the families, do you have any resistance or reluctance of the families to get involved, and how do you deal with that? Because I've read a lot about stigma, and there's a lot of stigma when it comes to mental health. Mm-hmm. People feel that mental health is something that shows weakness, or that shows bad parenting, or shows a violent person. How do you deal with the parents' reluctance to get involved, and how do you convince them that this is a good program for them and their kids?
It's a really good point, because I also think one big difference is there's sometimes a cultural barrier to therapy. Within certain cultures, there are sometimes even stronger stigmas against mental health. Mm-hmm. So I am very, very blessed and lucky to have an extremely diverse staff. So a lot of times that helps, because different therapists are able to talk to different parents and sort of help in their own language to describe, the benefits of mental health and why it might be important.
It sounds like some of your parents and kids come from Hispanic families
yes.
that have a different language orientation.
Yep. And African American families, Asian families. So we get we're outside of Hartford, so there's people from all around the world that end up here in Connecticut, in that part of Connecticut. So I think it's very important to have a staff that reflects the same population that you're trying to serve.
How do people pay for your service?
Well, that is a really good question, and we do accept insurance within our program, so it just depends on your insurance plan about how much the program will be.
Thank you. Vic, I'd like to go to the slides so that Kathy can talk about the different mood and feeling orientation. Can you put those on the screen? Vic, I'm not hearing you. My hearing is not going well. There we go. Okay, Kathy, let's turn to you now. You deal with kids from pre-K all the way through high school.
That's right.
Would you talk a little bit about some of the work on helping kids understand their feelings and how to handle them? Okay, we put a slide up on the screen showing mood meters. Could you explain what those slides represent, please?
Absolutely. So the state of Connecticut Department of Education has placed a major focus on teaching children social emotional skills, and we begin doing that right in when they first come to us. So this is a representative of the mood meter, which is part of Mark Brackett's work in the Ruler program.
Now he's from Yale, isn't he? And he's done a lot of pioneering work in helping kids recognize their feelings and how to handle them. And this slide in particular is for young kids like K and first graders, right?
That's right, yes. And so we want the kids to be able to identify what it is that their body is feeling. So the ideal kind of states for learning are those that are more to the right of the quadrants. So the more comfortable you are, and the more in control your energy level is, the more you're going to be available for learning. So we start off kind of with some basic emotions, teaching the kids to be able to identify if they are in the yellow or in the red or the blue, and more importantly, the tools that they need in order to get them into more into the quadrants that are more in the green and yellow side. And then that progresses through as the kids go through the grades. So this is an example of a mood meter that would be for like, kindergarten, first, maybe second grade. And then they just progressively get a little bit more advanced
Vic, that's right. This is like for middle schoolers, right?
Yep, middle or high school. So this this visual was created by a high school student in the state, and it's taking the same kind of emojis that kids are used to, but it expands the vocabulary it builds on the vocabulary that they've already started to learn of different feelings, words, to really be able to identify what feeling that they are feeling in the moment. Is there a further slide? Yes, that's the high school slide. Sure.
Right?
Yep. And then it just progresses even more.
The upper left-hand corner, that's the red. Those are the really sort of the very strong feelings.
Yes, exactly. So more kind of feeling a little bit more discomfort and like the uncomfortable feelings and maybe like a high energy. So,
and what about the lower left-hand corner?
Yep. So those are lower energy feelings, but may not necessarily be available for learning because those are more like internalizing states. So you might be bored or complacent, fatigued, sad, and the colors kind of match what the feelings are.
How about the upper right now?
Yep, the upper right quadrant, we're looking at ecstatic and joyful. That's again it's high energy and moving more towards comfortable, being comfortable, lively, cheerful, but you can see those words are more active, exhilarated, and then moving down to the bottom right green quadrant, that's exactly where you want kids to be in order for their brains to be available for learning.
Nice.
So the first step is really just kind of teaching kids to be able to identify using the right vocabulary for what they're truly feeling, because if they're misidentifying, then the intervention that you might suggest for them might be an intervention that's great for one feeling but not appropriate for another one. So the work is to kind of get them to identify their feelings, get them comfortable with the vocabulary, and certainly as they get older, then their vocabulary expands and their understanding of their ability of what they need to do in order to get themselves prepared for learning increases as well.
What about kids that come in feeling really angry or furious or out of control? How do you help kids like that are going through a mental health crisis or trauma?
Yep. So we've done that in different ways across different districts that I've worked in. So sometimes I think it goes back to, again, though, as helping the kids to identify what those feelings are, and then as the kids are older, they're able to also identify what they need in order to get themselves back. So that might be a walk.
When you say get themselves back, what do you mean by that?
Kind of get themselves back into the green, and get themselves back out of that kind of hot of feeling where their amygdala is activated, their brain is flooded with cortisol, which is the stress hormone, which shuts down the thinking part of the brain. So we want to get them back into feeling more comfortable and more aware of how their thoughts turn into their actions, and thoughts turn into feelings, which then turn into actions.
Before we were talking about chill sessions or quiet
like
corners.
A chill room. Or a calming room.
How are those used, and what grade levels use those?
So that was a big thing that kind of happened after the pandemic. A lot of classrooms were doing this pre-pandemic as well, but I think they really, it expanded greatly after the pandemic. A lot of schools used grant money for teachers to be able to, within their own classroom, create a calming corner that would have different kind of examples of square breathing, different methods that the kids could use in order to get themselves regulated. And then, so if a school has enough space that is not being used and can be designated as a chill space or a recovery room. We've heard them called. They could have a whole separate room. But a lot of schools are doing things like this even within their own classrooms and also in the hallways of the classrooms too.
Yeah, you said that even some teachers can partition part of their classroom off so the person can sit by himself in a quiet corner.
Absolutely. Yep. And still, they're still kind of within earshot of what's going on and can still participate. Kids, sometimes they can still participate, but they're not able to sit in their seat, right? And, you know, kind of, they just have to go about it a little bit creatively. And the teachers are supportive of that, and they're creating spaces for it within their own classroom.
Christine, turning to your group now, your group of teens and preteens, how do you get them to understand their feelings and to be able to respond to, say, difficult feelings?
So we, both the teens and the preteens, which are separate IOP programs, preteen is 9 to 12, teen is 13 to 17. So they're definitely sort of a different type of curriculum, but the curriculum that we use is called DBT, which is dialectical behavioral therapy, which is really the gold standard therapy for learning emotional regulation, which is sort of exactly what Kathleen's talking about, which is, you know, really as humans, like the primary issue. You know, I always tell people, when you think about a bad decision, it's always an emotional overreaction, you know? So if you can learn as a person to not diminish your emotions, but control your emotions and be the driver of your emotions and not have your emotions be the driver of you, you're able to set up success in your life.
Working with groups of kids like the teens, like you said, or the preteens, do you find there's a process by which they're helping each other learn these things?
Oh, yeah. It's beautiful. I have to say, like, it's groups are a living, breathing thing. It's always ever changing. People come in with their own issues and, you know, differences, and, you know, everything changes every single day when you have a group of 8 to 10 kids, you know, and you never know what you're going to get, which is the beauty of a big part of it. And because of that, kids are able to come into leadership roles with other kids, which is really a wonderful thing, because often, unfortunately, many of the kids that we have in IOP are not in super competitive sports. They're not in debate club. They're too anxious to do a lot of the things where they're able to be leaders in their school. Okay, so yeah, they're able to we encourage them to take leadership roles and to develop.
Nice. So
to
they're gaining new skills,
right, and to mentor other kids, right?
That's wonderful.
In the process.
Killingly, I know, it was the curtain capital of the year of the world in the early 20th century. You work with families, don't you? Killingly is like a lot of other rural areas around the state, where there's an economic sort of recession, isn't there? And so the families are feeling that.
Absolutely.
I know you involve the families. Tell us a little bit about how you involve the families, and how do you overcome their resistance to their own, dealing with their own issues, mental health issues?
Well, I think, as Christine mentioned too, we're looking at kids in the context of their system, so their family system and our community as a whole. So when the community is struggling, then I think that's we see that in our schools as well. So I think it starts holistically, and we're looking to meet all of the needs of our students, and that includes their families. So whether it's food insecurity or sharing resources about you know, energy assistance, different things like that, and developing community partnerships with some agencies that are in the area to provide wraparound services for when the school day ends. So up where we are in the northeastern part of the state, there are not, we're not lucky to have so many wonderful programs. We're very limited in the number of programs that we have.
Let me just jump in here to say, how do you involve the parents? You said that you had community meals for them. And
Yeah.
that's a way of bringing them together and helping to start the working with them. Is that correct?
Yes. So in different roles, we've had quarterly community feasts, we called them, and brought the parents in and to share a meal with our students and our faculty, and just to build those relationships over food.
Mm-hmm. Food
and
has
then
a way of bringing people
I like
together,
that,
doesn't
yeah.
it?
it sure does, right? And then you can share some resources while
Right,
while
yeah.
you're sharing
That's right.
sharing the meal. You know, so
Yeah.
it's been had been very successful.
You work with families too, don't you? Do you have any these kinds of ways of working with them, like bringing them together for over common meals or common?
We don't. We're not able to offer food because of licensing or DCF license, so we can't offer food. But we do have parents come in every Thursday. They come to the IOP program, and they actually learn the same skills that the kids learn.
Do they learn alongside their kids or separately?
They learn alongside the children, and really what we try to do is we try to get the kids to teach the parents, so the kids are taking ownership of these concepts, because as
very
you know,
nice.
when you teach something, you really learn it.
That's
So
true, yeah.
and I always tell the kids, hey, listen, parents are stressed out too, like they need to learn these strategies also, so you need to teach them, you know.
Oh, that's great.
And they really enjoy doing that.
Okay, now we're kind of out of time, but I'm going to ask you both to give a takeaway for our audience now, starting with you, Kathy.
Yeah, I think that my biggest takeaway would be that we are all connected, and the more that we can remember that and notice when someone's struggling and meet it with kindness, then I think our world would be a better place.
Thank you. And you mentioned, Christine, that you work as a village. Could you
Yeah,
comment on
so along with connection, I feel like we have always lived and breathed and solved problems as a tribe. And I think connection, purpose, and deep emotional human conversation, and really connecting with other people, old school style. I always tell kids, like the dinosaurs did, So
I wanted to talk a little bit about social media, but we're not going to have time for it tonight.
Yeah.
But that's another issue altogether, isn't it?
Yeah.
I want to thank you both for joining me on the program tonight, and I want to thank the viewers too for listening in. I hope you enjoyed the program, and I'll see you next month with another program. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.